This episode is brought to you by Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Some things are just better together, like party playlists and Friday nights, campfires and ghost stories, peanut butter and chocolate. And Reese's Cups are the perfect combination of creamy peanut butter and delicious milk chocolate. So, when you want something sweet, you can't do better than Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Buy Reese's today wherever candy is sold.
In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Serie Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
And welcome to the Serie Chronicles podcast. I'm Mina, Rzouki, and as always, I'm joined by Nicky Bandini. But before I bring her on to say hello, I just wanted to remind you all that this is our monthly free episode, and we're also running a 14-day free trial for our Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership. So if you want to join and see what it's like to be a member of this podcast, head to seriachronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi membership for free. You'll get access to all our old podcasts, listen in, see if you like it, and decide what you want to do after that. But let's bring in Nicky. Hi, Nicky. How are you?
I'm good, Mina. How are you?
I know you've been back from the States for a while, but it's kind of nice to know that you're still like only an hour away and not much further than that.
Do you know, like, I have been back for a while and I still feel like I haven't quite like got my sleeping patterns back where they should be. I'm on Mina time, actually. That's what I've done. Because Mina,
really?
if people haven't already picked this up, is like a total night owl. And like, I'm not normally, but I've sort of just got to this pattern now where it's like I'm nearly back to the proper hours, but I just keep staying up like till like, you know, half midnight, 1 a.m. or something, and just never quite getting back to where I'm supposed to. Yeah, it's like I just sort of, I've run most of the marathon and then decided I'm just going to sit down and not finish it.
So I was listening to this podcast recently, Nicky, of a Formula One driver doing an interview. And basically halfway through the podcast, his alarm went off. And then he sort of was like, oh, I'm really sorry. It's just the time that I wake up. And obviously the presenter then sort of realized what he said and said, wait, hold on. What are you talking about? It's 11:30 in the morning. That's your time to wake up in the morning is 11:30 in the morning. Like, totally shaming him for that time, right? And then he's like, oh, no, I'm kidding. It wasn't my time to wake up. It was just an alarm. Obviously, he's now feeling pressured into saying that, like, you know, he's not this night owl. And then he comes back and is like, well, no, it's my alarm to wake up when I'm on holiday. Like, okay, fine. But do you know what I mean? But in my head, I'm like, why do we still shame people who wake up late if they work till late? Like, what's the issue? Do you know what I mean?
I think if you're a successful Formula One driver, you probably deserve some slack, don't you? Like, as long as you're doing successful Formula One driving, you can wake up when you want. But also, like...
Are you saying I'm not successful enough to deserve my...
I'm saying you're not a Formula One driver, to the best of my knowledge.
No, I'm not. So you're saying that I haven't earned the right to wake up late in the morning?
I wasn't saying you can't wake up when you want. I was trying to disagree with this person saying they can wake up when they want. You can wake up whenever you want, Mina. I'm not your mum, so you can do what you want.
Yeah, when we were doing fighting talk, they were like, "Are you all right for coming in at 10:30 in the morning?" And I was like, "Oh, for goodness sakes, can't you just like delay this podcast? Like, it's just way too early in the morning." Like, and every time they ask me to do it, I'm like, "No, I'm busy. I just want to lie in." I swear to you, I'm very professional after 12. Okay, I'm just not all there before that, you know. But anyway, enough.
I definitely feel like a Formula One driver. Sorry, I'm just going to carry on the chit chat now.
Yeah, go on then.
I feel like a Formula One driver in my head because I don't follow Formula One. I don't really know much about Formula One. But like, where a professional footballer, I'm like, no, I expect you to like probably have like good sleeping patterns because like you're training all day. And I totally get that Formula One is incredibly physically like exerting and tiring. But I also like just my idea of Formula One, I think probably is like completely like outdated from the 90s, whatever. My dad used to watch it. I feel like they're supposed to be like playboys and they're supposed to be like out late, like having that sort of lifestyle because that's what being a Formula One driver is. So like I would almost be like disappointed if Formula One drivers weren't like staying up late and I don't know, swanning around red carpet events.
So wait, hold on. So you think footballers are like the professional bunch and the Formula One is like the and they're playboys. So what you think like footballers are like loyal to their women?
I didn't say loyal to their women. I think that would be too optimistic. I was thinking loyal to their sleeping habits.
So they're not out till late. They're all like these poor little boys that come home really early and start cooking dinner for themselves and watch a nice show on Netflix and fall asleep at 10 p.m.
They're more like, I think of it more like a lot of professional footballers. This is awful now. I was thinking they're like kids who need to be like parented quite a lot and like get all their meals given to them and like told what time to go to bed and like you get up at this time. Because every professional footballer I've spoken to has kind of, when we've got into those topics, kind of definitely laid it out like that. Like, you know, when you're a professional footballer, a lot of your time is decided for you. And it's when you get told to jump, the only question you get to ask is how high.
Most of it's like being in the military.
I think that's a lot of footballers' experience. Obviously, it's not everyone. I mean, you know, Neymar's clearly out doing whatever he wants, isn't he? But I think for a lot of footballers, that is life.
I was going to say, like, do you remember Zaniolo and Ken, the guy who got sent off for 40 seconds of play?
We're going to get to Moise Kean, aren't we?
You know, it's really interesting because I'm somebody who, obviously, like, having watched football and seeing yourself transition from the kind of, like, pundit you are or your beliefs and how much they change as you get older. I was somebody who, I told you I would be Zamparini. I would sack my coach like every 2 weeks, right? And now I'm totally against that. Like now I get really upset if they sack a coach because I'm like, he hasn't had enough time. And I was somebody who's like, if a player did something wrong, I'd be like, get rid of him. Like, what an idiot. Like, this is, you know, you have to be professional. It's very hardcore. I wonder if it was like the banking stuff I did before. And now I kind of felt really bad for Moise Kean when he got sent off. And now I feel really bad for all these like Zaniolo. I was like, all right, the guy made a mistake. Okay, he wanted to leave and now he wants to stay. Like, let him stay, you know? And I just feel like now I'd be a terrible football president. Whereas I think when I was a kid, I could have done a better job.
Should we talk about Moise Kean and Juventus and everything that happened?
Yeah, well, considering our producer came in today with a bloody Roma shirt, yeah, like trying to, and then you know what he says at the top of the show? I've done this for you, Mina. I won't show you what I did to him. But either way, it was I don't know whether we can call it a terrific match, but it was certainly entertaining, at least in the second half. Definitely not the first one. I thought I was going to pass out. Ended with a 1-0 in a match that I would say Mourinho out-Allegri. Or is he the original Allegri is the question, right? What did you think, Nicky? Enjoyed it?
I enjoyed both the two big games this weekend. Obviously, there's two big games with two Roman clubs winning, and we will talk about the other one as well. But I found them both compelling. We were sort of joking about this before we came on because, of course, like on Sunday, Serie A was not exactly a goal glut. We had 2 0-0s, and then you had Inter Lecce, which was a bit of a sort of damp squib. And meanwhile, Liverpool were thumping Man United 7-0, which I didn't even realise had happened. I checked the score at halftime, it was 1-0. I didn't even notice I came back and saw it was 7-0. So I think from a spectacle point of view, we were maybe a little bit short, but I thought this game was interesting. I thought there was a certain amount of nuance to it that was interesting. I thought there was actually a lot of similarity between the ways that Roma and Lazio both approached their games and of course, very, very similar outcomes. But the key things, obviously, certainly for Jose was not starting with Tammy Abraham and bringing Gini Wijnaldum in to be notionally like a trequartista, notionally like behind Dybala with Pellegrini. But in reality, that became, I saw one report describing it as not so much a false nine Dybala as just no number 9 at all. And it did feel like that. There was really like nothing in the center of the pitch pushing forward for Roma. Everything was down the flanks. Everything was working the outsides. And other than that, they were just very compact. Look, it's not necessarily flashy and exciting constantly to watch, but bear in mind where we were with this with this Roma side 2 years ago when Mourinho came in, and again at the end of last year after he'd been there for a year. The knock on this Roma side was Roma don't win the big games. Roma always drop points against Juventus, against Milan, against Inter, and this sort of specific team, I even saw Corriere della Sera ran a story the day before the game saying there was not one player in the entire Roma squad who had a positive balance of wins to losses against Juventus. There were only 4 who were even in terms of wins and losses against Juventus. That's when they only played once. They drew the game earlier this season. And poor Belotti, who was off the bench, had, I think it was 16 games with 12 losses and 4 draws. So you had a whole group of players who do not beat Juventus ever. If you've got to make it cagey and not thrilling to get the result, go get your result. And he got the result, Mourinho. And so for that, I think he deserves heaps of credit.
Yeah, I thought it was a well-executed game plan, to be honest with you. But let's start off with sort of what happened in the week coming up to this match, because I thought like that was probably so interesting. This match was really building up because obviously of what Mourinho was sort of doing. They suffered a loss to Cremonese, who managed their first win in Serie A. And it wasn't something we could really talk about because it escalated between Jose Mourinho, the fourth official. He was red carded and supposed to be banned for 2 games. That got, well, it's being suspended, this punishment, until they fully investigate what just happened and what the fourth official really did say to Jose Mourinho, because Mourinho was livid with what he said was a disrespectful comments made to him by the fourth official. Things like go home, or I don't know, just really like things that you shouldn't really exactly say to a football manager. I don't really know what happened there. At the same time, Mourinho is Mourinho. People were accusing him, well, Gazzetta was accusing him of doing this to deflect from the fact that you lost to Cremonese. Like no one in the whole of Serie A this season has lost to Cremonese. And this is your way of saying it's not about that. It's about what the fourth official did. Although I feel like when the sentence has been suspended, then there's more to it than that. So I thought that was interesting. But it was nice to have him back on the bench just to add to the drama. I liked his hug with Allegri. Meanwhile, Allegri had come from this great match against Torino, which I swear to you, I would have bet my house would have been a 1-0 victory, right? Like it's just one of those games because it's against a defensive Torino. You know, they are quite stingy defensively. Juventus are 1-0 team. And you just thought this was going to be dull, but Torino took the lead. Juventus managed to equalize. They took the lead again. Juventus managed to equalize again. And then in the second half, they sort of, ran rampant when they brought on the likes of Pogba and Chiesa. Pogba finally back on the pitch. That was the big story. Great performers. Paredes was overlooked for youth. It was about them pressing. It was about them choosing to play kids. It was about them looking to score 4 goals and actually managing it and never sort of like letting themselves off the hook. And all of a sudden it went from Allegri out to we can work with this. But we're back to Allegri out because they lost to Roma. It's amazing how much your fortune can change. Because I read this all the time and I get really angry when they talk about Inter, because it's kind of like Inter, can they secure top 4? And then they beat Lecce. Inter have solidified second place. And I'm like, okay.
This has been such a season for narrative, hasn't it? It's been such a season for like grabbing a story. And we talked about this with Patrick when he came on, didn't we? That, Patrick was, sorry, the police are coming for Mina in the background, I think.
It is London. I'm still here, don't worry. I haven't done anything.
Such a season of like swings for like most teams. And Patrick was talking about like that bit where Juventus hadn't lost in a while and before the punishment came down, thinking they could win the title. And I honestly, I've always been rolling my eyes at the suggestion that they could be the competitor to Napoli. I never really saw it, but it is true that they would be second still if you took away the points penalty. So they have been better than most teams in Serie A. Mourinho is like as good a case as you can get for like the swinging narratives. I mean, this week, as you've sort of just touched on there, has been like the wildest week, because 100% that's what he was doing. I don't care whether or not we'll get, well, I do. I'm not saying he shouldn't care. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some sort of appeal process, but I personally don't care if Serie did say rude things to him or not, because it's still going to be true that this is something we've seen Mourinho do all through his career.
Yeah.
When something goes wrong, it's what do they call it? In politics, they talk about the dead cat strategy, where like you just walk into the room and throw a dead cat on the table, then it doesn't matter what everyone's talking about. Now they're going to talk about the dead cat. That's Mourinho. Like, that's what he likes to do. Like, just walk in and like, just give you a distraction. Like, everyone talk about this. Don't talk about what just happened. Because they lost to Cremonese in the league and in the cup, right? Cremonese, who haven't beaten anyone in Serie A at all, have now beaten them twice. And yet you come from that and get things together and get this really strong performance out of your team in the game against Juventus. And I think there's sort of a lot of mystery still with how good this team is or isn't. But I think there are some things that he does deserve us to acknowledge, which is defensively, Roma have been very tight. They haven't conceded a goal at home since the start of 2023. Obviously, expected goals is one of those stats that's a bit murky because different people use different measures. But if you go off the website Understat, which is one that people use quite a lot, they have the fewest expected goals against Roma in all of Serie A and also in all of Europe's top 5 leagues. So actually, defensively, they have been impressive. And we've talked about Chris Smalling before having a good season. Actually, Mancini has been quietly a nice reclamation project for Mourinho, because I don't think he's that good still. He's got a great goal out of nowhere this weekend, but he's getting more out of him than they were before. And he is doing a good job of making Roma a more solid team defensively. There is still this question over them, which he sort of himself was playing on in his post-game remarks about why are they so inconsistent? And Mourinho's answer is always just because we're not concentrating enough, because we're not all applying at the same level every game. If we played at this level every game, we'd win every game. And that's probably not quite the whole story either. But I do think it's fascinating how he has got some parts of that really right. And definitely he deserves some acknowledgement for winning this game and for having Roma currently joined fourth with Milan on points. They drew when they played early this season, so the tiebreak between those two will come down to the second game that they play.
Yeah, I mean, it should be noted that neither Juventus or Roma really play fantastic football. But I think the mark of a good side is not one that entertains you. It's one that has a game plan and executes it perfectly. And I feel like on this occasion, perhaps because in many ways you expect between this match that it would be Juventus who should be attacking, not the ones who are playing like the underdogs, right? If you ask me between the two teams, even though Juventus have kept a remarkable number of clean sheets, which one I would say is better defensively, I'm going to say it's Roma. And I think it makes a huge difference that against Cremonese, they didn't have Smalling, because Smalling really is like the powerhouse in the middle. Mancini, for me, is a little bit of a dirty player. He's like a Pepe in the making. But you kind of want him in your team, because I would always want a Pepe in my team.
Cristante, quindi Mancini, limite dell'area, pensa al tiro, la batte! Mancini l'ha fatto, magnifico! Roma 1, Juventus 0.
Mourinho has been sent off 3 times this season. No Roma player has been sent off all season. Like, not one in Serie A. So on the dirty thing, like, I agree about Mancini as like his character is he's definitely a wind-up merchant. But actually, like, Roma's discipline on the pitch, unlike Mourinho on the sidelines, has been very good.
Yeah, I wonder whether he says, I'm doing this for you, sort of like, like a Chiellini on Saka in the Euros, like, I'm going to do this and I'll take the hit if I need to, but, I'm doing this for my team, but without doing it on the pitch, right? No, you're right with Mancini. Actually, their discipline has been fantastic. Also, because this season, he had 21 yellow cards last season, 8 this time round. So far this season, that was noted by the commentators. So we obviously have seen a difference in the way that he plays his game. Is very, very clever, and I like that. Whereas before, he would get fouled and he would foul and get a yellow card. Nowadays, he knows how to shield that a little bit more. Maybe he's a Chiellini in the making, if you like. But having Smalling back, I always think Smalling just makes such a difference. Like we talk so much about tomorrow, but I feel like Smalling doesn't get enough of like, I just like him missing against Cremonese. It just made the world of difference. But otherwise, you could say that, yeah, they're just better in what we always joke about what I like in football. And apparently I love bad football and I hate a Pep. It's not about that. I'm not a systems girl. I like teams that are flexible and tactically and teams that know how to make a difference as the game goes on. But what I really like mostly is teams that execute their game plan, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't know how to explain this. It becomes really hard, but you have to know how to play the fundamentals of football. It annoys me when teams don't understand the fundamentals, how to defend a set piece, how to defend as a team, how to be compact when required, how to suffer when necessary, how to, ride it, like if it's the last minute of the match, how to go to the, to take it out wide, or go as far as you can and not try to score a goal and lose possession. Like these fundamentals, I like teams that know how to do that. It's just, for me, it's most important that you secure the result and everything that comes afterwards, elevation, style of play, it comes afterwards, but know the fundamentals. And on this occasion, Roma did the fundamentals really, really well. And that's why I think they deserve to win it. That doesn't mean that Juventus didn't do a good job. I thought they hit the woodwork 3 times. They constantly try to go forward to find themselves, especially in the second half a little bit more in the beginning to try to snatch victory if they could. But I just thought the wall of Roma was really spectacular. The only thing is that I probably wouldn't have gone with that false 9 strategy. Like I would have played with Abraham and Belotti, or one of them at least starting. I think that would have made even more of a good game in the beginning.
Hang on, wait, whoa. Did I just hear Mina say that she would start Belotti in a game? I mean, that's something I think I've never heard.
No, definitely not Belotti. Yeah, you're right. I would never start Belotti. I'm so sorry, but I actually think he's a really good person. I'm really sorry. It's got nothing to do with personal. He's just a terrible striker these days.
It's not personal. You're just really bad at your job.
I don't know. It's just something that happened at Roma. I thought he was great at Torino. Sorry, that's my phone probably like yelling at me. But I also wanted to ask you.
It's Belotti. He's calling.
Why wouldn't you have? Would you not have started El-Shaarawy?
Look, I think what I would have done is feels kind of moot because what Mourinho did worked, right? I mean, yeah, it did feel a bit sort of like a straight up.
It's also a bit lucky though.
What's the word? I don't know. Like it's a straight up like telling your opponent very openly, like we're not going to try to attack you, which is unsubtle, but it worked. Yeah, I probably would have wanted to start like a little bit more. El-Shaarawy is nice because you can stretch the game a little bit, and so you get a little bit of extra like zip going forward. But clearly, Jose just wanted to really sort of set in with what was effectively 2 banks of 5 and just make it really congested. And that did work. You're right about Juventus hitting the woodwork 3 times. And actually, I was still going to pick up on that, like, because the last of those was off Mancini, who was sort of somehow in the middle of absolutely everything, not only scoring the goal and hitting his own woodwork, but also, I mean, Moise Kean was an idiot. And I think you get sent off for that because you're an idiot. But at the same time, Mancini was definitely
fouling him.
He fouled him and then did this ridiculous flop. It was definitely some grade A shithousery, to use the word that everyone uses, from Mancini to get him sent off. Doesn't mean that Kean isn't an idiot, because he is.
He is, yeah.
In that moment, it's not global judgment on Kean, but yeah, in that moment he did something stupid. Yeah, Juventus did have chances, and I did see Roberto Pruzzo, the sort of former Roma great, whose sort of verdict on the radio was the difference between this game and other games that Roma haven't won is that Roma had a goalkeeper in this game, which is a bit of a sort of savage, backhanded compliment for Rui Patricio, but he did make a couple of important saves. Yeah, I don't know, Mina, on the Juventus side of it, it still feels, maybe more than ever it feels actually, less than the sum of its parts. There was a point with this Juventus team when it felt more sort of okay to me to say, well, they have been missing all these players, and actually if they're getting the results, what can you really say about that? They're getting the corto muso. But now when you do look at that pitch and you see players who a lot of money has been spent on, and it's I've really been reluctant to target him. Vlahovic feels like such an obvious target.
I'm glad that everyone's buying into like my initial complaints about him, that I was like abused and trolled for like weeks about my comments about Vlahovic. And now everyone is writing to me being like, I don't see where you're coming from.
You expect more, right? He's a really expensive centre forward, and it hasn't happened. And at this point, yeah, someone who costs that much money should be helping you not lose these games, and he feels very anonymous in these games.
Kostic, who I've been quite hard on, is actually like growing into, I think, has really figured out sort of his niche, and he's a very, very hard worker. Like, he's really been sort of carving a hole in my heart for him right now, Kostic. So I think he deserves a little bit of praise. I'm still unsure as to how Cuadrado still plays for Juventus, but he does what he does.
He hit the post.
And he did score a magnificent goal against Torino.
Yeah, he scored against Torino. We didn't even mention that. They won the derby.
But everything he does is almost by accident. And I'm like, really, did you mean that? Like, I don't know how to explain. But yes, he does. Cuadrado is capable of some of those moments that you just think, oh God, I love you. You know, like, thanks for doing that. But here's the thing. The one thing I do want to mention is that basically Roma at the end brought on Abraham and Belotti, right? If you are looking for your counter-attacking opportunities, because you know now that Juventus have to move forward, right? They're pushing as much as they can to get an equalizer. So you're trying to capitalize on bringing in, on counter-attacking. Why would you bring on Belotti and Abraham and not bring in El-Shaarawy, who actually has some pace? Just one question. Another thing, I love that people sort of applaud the fact that Juve ended it with a 4-man defense and 4 forwards. It's never about the number of forwards. It's about your efficacy. And sometimes that can happen by changing fullbacks, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the more forwards you have on the pitch, the better that you are. And I have an issue that ever since, like, I just feel like with Vlahovic out there, who doesn't contribute enough to the overall play in the final third. And it's interesting because against Salernitana, which was, I think, his first game back, I thought he was fantastic. I was like, well, this is the £80 million player that we paid for. And then ever since, it's still like, same old Vlahovic, one that just seems really upset and low on confidence. And yes, it doesn't help that he plays for an Allegri team, but I actually don't buy into that because every other player has made the most of it and done pretty well, to be honest with you. And I just feel like had Milik been there would have been more opportunities, perhaps. And Vlahovic is having a lot of one-on-one time as well with Allegri, who's staying behind after training and talking to him and trying to do things with him in the same way that Spalletti does with his players. But I don't know whether it's a confidence thing, but I don't even feel like he necessarily sometimes has the right attitude. You know he has it in him. You know he's a great player when he wants to be, when he can be. But something there is just not, I don't know, it's a Di Kettelare kind of scenario, but not exactly the same way. So yeah, Pogba's back, Chiesa's back. I think it's going to take time for us to really see all of that come together. I kind of would prefer to depend on things I know, like Fagioli in midfield, Kostic out wide right now. I mean, honestly, if I had the choice, I would have put Milik up front if he wasn't injured. I'd rather depend on those old things than start introducing this fancy trident with Chiesa and Vlahovic and Di Maria. I don't know whether Juventus is ready for that. I like Juventus being sort of a blue-collar team that scores goals that are white-collar, but like that's my Juve for me. Like, I think that's the kind of team that I want to watch. But Roma going forward, I can't, like, you watch that loss against them in Cremonese and you think, no, I can't see this team making top 4. Then you see that win and you think they are capable of these moments. And then Mourinho said they are as well. Are they, if it's not a big team that they're trying to quash?
They're capable of top 4 because I think they're one of, well, let's not be such prisoners of the moment to rule things out, but absolutely it's at the moment looking like there are 4 teams in pole position for 3 places now, isn't it? Which is assuming Juventus don't get the points penalty overturned, which who knows, that could happen. But you've got Inter on 50 points right now, Lazio on 48, Roma on 47, Milan on 47. Atalanta will get to them, but they feel like they're fading quite badly and they're on 42. So that really makes it look like you've got 3 spaces behind Napoli for 4 teams. Why shouldn't Roma be one of them? I don't see them as being behind particularly any of those teams in that group. Depends on many things. Depends on how much the Europa League takes out of their legs. Obviously, they've got a big tie against Sociedad coming up. Not the easiest draw they could have got. Depends on fitness of players and depends on consistency, which is going to be the big question. But it also, I don't know if you're trying to lead us on here, Mina, it will depend on Lazio, their neighbours, who also had a good game this weekend.
Yeah, they really did. One thing, just before we do move into that match, Dybala was attacked on social media. I'm very glad that he put in another sort of average performance, just so that I feel better about my choices, as if it was me that let him go. But attacked on social media because he celebrated the win at the end, and because there was a great save towards the end, and he sort of just pumped his fists. And I just found that remarkable that anyone would go on social media and be upset with him for celebrating with his new team after Juventus let him go, didn't renew his contract, the captain of the club, haven't even paid him all his wages yet because of all their salary maneuvers, well, allegedly still, to then go on social media and say, I thought you loved us. So what do you think you should do then? Like, start making sure that you win? It's unbelievable the way that fans behave sometimes. I'm somebody who totally understood the decision of letting go of Dybala, and I was happy with it. I still think I'd rather have a player like Di Maria on my team, even if he's old, than have Dybala, because I'm always feeling like there's this place that he's not hitting in potential. But the way that some fans react to things, I find mind-blowing.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is classic, like, you dumped your partner and now you're mad because they're seeing someone else and having a good time. I'm sorry, but that's what that is. It wasn't his decision to leave. That was
precisely.
Juventus said, no, we're done with you. And he went off and found someone better for him. And sorry, now he's happy.
Yeah, now he's happy. Pogba's not happy that he's gone, but he's happy, and so let him be happy, for goodness sakes.
No, Pogba and Dybala were mates. That was a happy time for them at Juventus, wasn't it? Things got worse for both of them when Pogba left.
Exactly that.
Fischia Maresca! Vince la Roma! Roma 1, Juve 0. Che squadra incredibile questa Roma, che nel giro di 5 giorni perde con l'ultima in classifica e poi gioca una prestazione maiuscola contro la Juventus.
Hey gang, just wanted to let you know that you can now get a free 14-day trial of our Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership.
Subscribe now for free for 14 days to get access to all of our full episodes, solo minisodes, bonus content, even behind the scene bonuses like our chats about football, and of course our chats about life in general. You can also get the entire back catalogue of Serie A Chronicles content.
So head over to serieachronicles.com/Patreon and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi membership for free.
Having said all of this, without the 15-point penalty, as we mentioned, Juventus would be in second with 50 points, joint with Inter, who are also 50 points. Lazio, though, behind by 2, 48, one ahead of Roma now, but a thrilling game on Friday. Oh, I'm not sure thrilling is the right word, but a very, very good game on Friday evening, as Lazio managed to make Napoli lose their second game of the season, their first against Inter. And obviously you did a great voice note about it, and so we're going to address this. Actually, no, before I do address this, just a quick one here. You don't really think that this means anything about Napoli, but this is like Lazio coming into the fore, right?
Yeah, no, I joked on Twitter about, like, oh, look out, gap at the top could be down to 15 points, which it nearly wasn't, of course, because Milan then didn't win, but Inter did win. No, they're 15 points clear with, what is it now, 13 games left to go?
Mm-hmm.
I see zero chance that Napoli will not win the title, although I did have a Napoli fan immediately on Twitter saying within 3 weeks it's going to be down to 6 points. They have got...
Oh my God.
They have got, on paper, probably their toughest stretch of what's left in the league season coming up, right? Because they've got Atalanta at home next. Then you've got the second leg against Frankfurt, which actually is probably not as bad as it sounds because of how well the first leg went. Then you've got Torino away, then Milan at home. And if you skip ahead a couple of games from there, then you get Juventus away at the end of April. So there are some games coming up that they could find not just walks in the park, but it's still, even if you lost all of those, which they won't, they'd still have 6 points of leeway, assuming that Inter win all of their games, which they probably won't. So it's not a thing. No, it's not a title race. It's still very much a procession, but they lost this one.
Okay, let's run through some important things. They haven't lost at home, Napoli, since April 10th of last year. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
A loss after 8 consecutive victories and the last 4 without conceding a goal. Osimhen didn't score after scoring in 8 games in a row. Osimhen and obviously Kvaratskhelia had managed 29 goals and 12 assists, but managed nothing against Lazio. 1 shot on target in each half by Napoli. But this was all a little bit about Sarri coming home and showing us just how well he knows Napoli and how well to restrict their game plan. And everyone was talking about this and is this just because, and you mentioned this is what I want to talk to you. You said that maybe sometimes you can be a little bit off your game because you can't accept exquisiteness at every turn. And I very much agree with that. But here's the thing, on this particular occasion, do you remember the reverse fixture?
Vaguely, it's been a while.
It was, but I thought at the time, and do you remember it was like Lazio should have had a penalty at the end and you felt like they were kind of hard done by in that match?
Because it was a 2-1 win for Napoli, wasn't it? It was 2-1 in September.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it should have been a 2-2, to be honest with you. I mean, well, we don't know. But either way, there was I can understand why Lazio were really upset that they didn't get a penalty at the very end. They were denied by, I think it was VAR. But Lazio were just fantastic. Yeah, they took a lead early on, and then they were just this complete, perfect block, which they have been, by the way. They had one of the best defenses at the start of the season. They played differently to the way that Atalanta did, but they both were on par with how good they were defensively. Obviously, things went a little bit different. Lazio, when they want to be, can play some of the best football that you'll ever watch. And it's very different to Napoli under Sarri. Lazio under Sarri is different, but I like that kind of football in particular. They defended so well at the time against Napoli. They closed down their parking lanes. They knew how to counterattack, and they were very vertical when they needed to be. They won all their duels at the time. And I remember Spalletti came out afterwards, and I was checking this yesterday in his post-match conference and said, we didn't move the ball around fast enough. But it's fine because Kvaratskhelia just had one of those games that changes your life. But this occasion, he came out, Spalletti, again after the game and said, we didn't pass the ball fast enough. And I'm like, this happens a lot against Lazio. And if anyone's paying attention, then Lazio have just given you the blueprint on how you can really try to get at Napoli, right? And I don't know whether it's the only thing that worries me, because I agree with you, Napoli will win the Scudetto. I need them to win the Champions League, So I want to make sure that when you do sort of become this compact unit that tries to starve everyone of space to move around or to do this, is there another way of doing this? And that's because I don't trust their defense, right? And so that's the only thing that I'm saying, if you are playing against a team that can defend as a block and move as compactly as Lazio can and win their duels, what do they do then? Is it annoying that they didn't introduce some substitutions earlier?
I think it's really interesting that you went and dug that out, Mina, about what Spalletti said last time, because to me that just sounds like if it's happening twice, it's very much you can't move the ball quick enough because Lazio aren't letting you. And I mean, the compactness of Lazio, I think even compared to Roma, exactly. it was really something because it wasn't sort of so much formational. With Roma, it was a very clear sort of shift from that 3-4-2-1 into just the banks of 5. With Lazio, it was just the 4-3-3 was still there, but the gap from the front to the back of it was so small. The Immobile was constantly helping moving backwards. So you had all through the team, just this willingness to just compact the whole pitch down basically to 20 meters for a lot of the game. And it's very hard to pick your way through that amount of space. And it's actually a very effective sort of counter to, if you listen to how Spalletti has talked about football this year or through the year, he doesn't have a very rigid way of attacking with Napoli. His whole system relies on having a group of intelligent footballers who he's helped to teach to work out where the space is and then exploit it. And I think the Eintracht Frankfurt game was a really good example of this, because they started off looking for space down the left where Kvaratskhelia was. Kvaratskhelia was completely mobbed. And then what they realized was that the one place where Frankfurt were trying to be adventurous sometimes, were trying to make those pushes forward, was on their left-hand side and where the fullback kept pushing on. And so suddenly it was, Lozano's got some space over here, let's go for it. And Lazio just didn't give that space. They didn't do it the whole game. And I think that when you contrast the Roma win with the Lazio win, they're superficially so very similar, right? Because both games of few chances, games of one team, in both cases, the team from Rome, playing this very compact style. Both of them won by a shot that requires a bit of good fortune because both of them are shots from outside the box. If you give Vecino or Mancini that same opportunity 10 times, they don't score it every time, right? These are not players who score those goals every time from outside the box. They're just things that happen. But to me, the difference is Lazio felt much more structured and much less vulnerable. Because actually in the whole game, the only chance to me that really resonated for Napoli was when they themselves also hit the woodwork, as Juventus did, but instead of doing it 3 times, they did it once. And it was Victor Osimhen on a header from a corner. And you know what? Like, Victor Osimhen is the best striker in this league. He is, by some distance. So if all you've got given up in 90 minutes against this team is one chance to that guy, I think you've done a pretty special job, frankly, because no one's coming away from Naples without giving him a chance. So I thought their defensive work was really, really impressive. And I also thought, and I did say this on the voice note, but in case anyone didn't hear it, I thought if you look at the goal they did score, Lazio, it's not a goal actually from nothing. The shot is a bit from nothing. It's Vecino. There's just been a moment when Napoli could clear the ball, he didn't quite manage it. But the 90 seconds building up to that goal, in a game where Lazio overall had 35% possession, for 90 seconds they held the ball almost completely. And it's all exactly the football actually that Sarri's Napoli played when they played well. Little triangles, moving up the pitch in a very coordinated way, not getting too far away from each other, keeping those spaces really tight. So even if you lose the ball, you're not going to risk anything, but actually showing that when we want to play this quick one-touch football, we can do it. And I thought that it was a really, really impressive and almost unnoticed build up to that goal because the last minute of it, or the last seconds of it are a bit chaotic because it is kind of just a flex to Vecino who just has a go.
Che allontana corto Vecino, destro! Gol meraviglioso di Vecino! La Lazio in vantaggio al 22esimo minuto. Nel corso del secondo tempo cambia il parziale al Maradona. Una sventagliata di Vecino dai 25 metri, forse anche qualcosina di più. Pallone colpito di controbalzo a mezza altezza verso l'angolo alla destra, lì dove non può arrivare Meret.
But the actual overall picture that built up to it was really impressive. I really enjoy Sarri's Lazio when they're on. I mean, they've had lots of missteps this season as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be just 1 point better off than Roma, right? They're not streets ahead. But when they're good, they're really good. And I thought they were really good this weekend.
You know, it's interesting because, like, again, we talk about coaching so much, but and Maurizio Sarri, from a purely tactical point of view, I think he's up there with the very best of them. You know, like, as in what he can do with your side. But with this match, in order to win this match, you needed to, like, the way that they played the game relied a lot on perfection, relied a lot on sort of winning your duels, being so concentrated the whole time, knowing exactly how to play that offside trap so you would catch Napoli off guard. It's one of those games where it's almost impossible to do if you have a lot of games to play, right? Which is why Lazio sort of sometimes fall apart against teams you wouldn't imagine them to fall apart against. And that's why, for me, Maurizio Sarri, who can develop a perfect game, is someone I would worry about as being my coach because he relies a lot on perfection. Whereas what I like a little bit more about Jose Mourinho, who, by the way, I'm not saying too is a better coach by any stretch of the imagination, secures the fundamentals in many ways, but also allows for mistakes because he knows how to sort of, he understands that people will make mistakes and it's difficult to remain concentrated, but find sort of a fallback plan for that. And I just feel like the way that when Lazio, like you said, when they're on, they're just outstanding. And they have I just checked, they have the second best defense in Serie A at the moment behind Napoli, obtained in a very different ways. It's not about them always having more possession, right? So it is about that defensive solidity. It is about managing this block. When you defeat them, you really can defeat them and they sort of crumble. But it is one of those things where he needs his play. And I think it's always going to be really hard for him to win it with these types of teams, right? Because he relies too much on perfection. And unless you have very top level players who can make up with individual quality, then you can't ask a team to do this all the time. And that's what worries me about Sarri going forward and winning trophies. But excellent game. I really want to see I know that Eintracht is obviously going to be an easy game, but I'm excited about Napoli's journey, and this hasn't at all troubled me, so don't worry, people. We're not actually, when we nitpick, it's just because we're trying to just, go through the finer details of what is already perfection by these two sides. So it is that. And
Napoli are fine. Like, you can't have 50 perfect games in a season. You can't. Like,
no.
It's never been done. And it's why it's so rare that you see a team go through a full season unbeaten, even when it's Bayern Munich trampling the Bundesliga. It's not often they get through the whole season without losing any games, right? I've used an example, it's a bad one, because I actually have no idea if that's something that's happened recently or not, because I don't follow the Bundesliga very closely, but I'm sure they do lose games most seasons, because it's just normal.
They do.
And they always finish on top at the end. So yeah, I'm not worried about that. And of course they can't be complacent in that Frankfurt tie, but it's very much one that is balanced in their favour now. I'm super interested to see how Roma and Lazio will handle their respective European commitments now. Obviously, Lazio are through in the Conference League and Roma are through in the Europa League. I saw Mourinho even this week was sort of, in the many inevitable Mourinho moments, saying, it's going to be much easier to win the Conference League this season. It's a much softer field than it was when I was in it. So yeah, classic Mourinho.
Of course.
Making out how he's always got it tougher than everyone else. But
is this the same guy who was heckling the under-14s in a Roma Lazio derby?
Oh my God, we didn't even mention that, did we? You know what's amazing, Mina? I love how, I don't actually, in lots of ways I hate it, but it's funny how the internet spins things in different ways, right? Because I'd seen sort of things popping up about, good guy Mourinho, look how after the under-14s won their derby, he brought all the players to meet the first team squad, and there were these like team photos of them all like sort of with the first team players enjoying themselves. And that's cool, right? You do make your young players feel involved. But then like the other part of this story comes out where apparently Mourinho and other senior people were like at this game and giving it out to teenagers, and I mean, it's ridiculous.
Wait, teaching them to time waste by feigning injury. And I'm like, well, Pellegrini took that on board. Not Pellegrini. I'm sorry, I totally threw Pellegrini under the bus, Mancini. But yeah, it is a funny story. Like, sometimes I'm always like, oh my God, like Mourinho drives me crazy, right? But then he does stuff like this and everyone's talking about it. And I just kind of feel like, I kind of like having him around. Like, he's...
Do you know, Mina, like, this is one of my favourite parts this weekend. I feel like Mourinho and Sarri both fit their environments so well. Like, Roma have embraced Mourinho. They have. Like, they're selling out the stadium every game. It's incredible. But Sarri also, like, vibes with Lazio so well, because Lazio really have this, like, as a fan base, and this is obviously sweeping. I'm not saying every Lazio supporter feels like this. Obviously not. Everyone's an individual. But the Lazio fan base as an identity has this identity of, we're this slightly outsider group and we are against the hypocrisy of modern football. Like, we think that everyone, because actually, this is some of it used really in a horrible context of like when their fans do things that are massively offensive, they'll be like, we're just highlighting the hypocrisy of modern football. But Sarri is like so in his identity, like the anti of modern football, isn't he? He's the one who could barely dress up smartly when Juventus needed him to. Wants to just sit there with his cigarettes and be scruffy and just talk in the blunt, plain way that he talks. And it works. Like, that identity of like fan to manager works at Lazio the same way as it does with Roma and Mourinho. So it's fun watching this rivalry between two halves of a city, I think. And right now they've both got managers who just sort of feel like they fit.
Yeah, I know. It does. It is really interesting to see how that keeps panning out for them. And I also kind of want to see, because there are 13 games left, where they end up in the league and who ends up having chosen the better plan or the better style, if you like.
Ultimi secondi di gioco, è finita! La Lazio sbanca il Maradona di Napoli, vince per 1-0 grazie alla rete di Vesino al 22esimo della ripresa, impresa invece della formazione di Maurizio Sarri, che riesce lì dove nessuno era mai riuscito, battere il Napoli al Diego Maradona. Gli applausi.
Other games that happened were Inter played and won against Lecce. A lot of people thought this is a potential banana skin because Inter don't like the small teams. But
because any game's a banana skin for Inter whenever they feel like it.
Yes, that is true. But this was a bit of a routine win that really, Lecce had a game plan of let's stifle, didn't work. That's it. No plan B. But there was, I thought, a great match between Fiorentina and Milan. Okay, so here's the thing. I do this fun betting show where I'm always in stitches because it's like, I like to hear different points of view, especially Americans, tell me what they think of Italian football sides, And everyone was so high on Milan about this, coming into this game. They had kept these clean sheets. They had gone back to winning. They did such a good job against Atalanta. Everyone is like, yeah, they found their way. We spoke about it as well, Thiago is the physical embodiment of power in the middle of three-man back line. And poor Fiorentina, should I say, people were telling me there was a lot on Fighting Talk about how Italian football is just, so boring and dull and defensive. And I was trying to explain to them, for example, Fiorentina are a side that creates so many chances, but for some reason, these goals just don't go in for them in Serie A. But when they play Braga in Europe, there's 7 goals, It's a, you know what I mean? They're coming up against different opponents who perhaps aren't so tactically organized. And I thought this was going to be a tough game for them, especially with the way that Milan have been playing. It's a little bit more organized, a little bit more defensive-minded. But Fiorentina totally bossed that match, especially in the first half. And I don't know, is it Milan having their mind on Spurs and that Champions League return leg, which will be in London? Or is this something that we should be a little bit more scared about?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I feel like it was definitely surprising just because there's been those 4 consecutive clean sheets, right? It was the whole narrative with this Milan team was, okay, they fixed it. They've gone to this back 3 and now it works. But right from the beginning of this game, it was only a few minutes in, wasn't it? When was it Cabral who got the wrong side of Thiago, and Thiago brought them down, and it was just a free kick, but there was just something really early on in that game, and I just remember seeing Thiago get turned around basically and give away that free kick and get booked, and I thought they're going to test them, they're going to try to get in behind them, and then it kept happening. They just kept finding that ability to get behind that defense, and it definitely is to Fiorentina's credit. Fiorentina stole nothing here. I mean, it was a pretty emphatic win, honestly. And it did raise that question of how real was Milan's progress these last few weeks. Was it slightly sort of less than we thought it was? Is there still vulnerability in that group of defenders? Because Tomori again did get beaten at times, gave away the penalty. Thiago was getting beaten at times. And yes, maybe as you said, Fiorentina just haven't got the results that they deserve for their performances so far, but it was another of those games where I wasn't sure how much to sort of give credit to one team and how much to say as well problems for the other team.
So we had a Chronicles Tifosi member, Paul Golfari, who asked, I just finished watching Fiorentina versus Milan. It hardly feels like a turnaround story with Magic Mike saving Milan from embarrassment. Can you comment on the tepid performance? What's going on in midfield that is making Milan so vulnerable? Yeah, I'm somebody who thinks midfield is kind of you have a good midfield, you win games. You have a bad midfield, you do nothing. On this occasion, though, while obviously this isn't my favorite type of midfield, but I did think that this was the type of match in which you either needed Brahim Diaz or you needed Leao. And ideally, you needed both. Because when you are playing against a team like Fiorentina, who are also very good on the ball, they're very aggressive, they're pressing high, and they're waiting for you to make mistakes, you need to be able to hold on to the ball. And Brahim Diaz is a player who knows how to do that, because the rest of the midfield and attacking players just didn't, Rebic and Di Ketelaere couldn't hold possession to save their lives. Giroud is somebody that you deliver the ball to. He's not there to hold the ball and play in the final third. Benacer, I would say, was the only one that is probably capable of that, but he's playing in a sea of players who don't do that. And if you can't hold on to possession and try to sort of slow the game down and dictate a little bit more, then you would need speed of thought and speed of just pace, which is where Leao comes in. And Leao was unfortunately unavailable. So I think the absence of those two players made a big... it affected them almost more than it should have, really, But it's just that this is where I go back to this, and I'm not sure whether this is, on this occasion, a tactical issue, more where I go back over and over again that this team isn't complete as a squad. It just doesn't have enough and different type of qualities required It's just that I don't know whether or not that they have this enough of a squad to really make up for if they do lose any types of players. And I do think that on this occasion, they needed ability in that final third to just keep the ball for a little bit. And I think Brahim Diaz is perfect in that. Or they needed a lot of pace to counterattack and play a different kind of game, especially when you've got Mike Maignan, who is capable of an assist and a throw forward. If you don't have somebody who can bring it down or do something or run onto it, then you have a problem. And I just think that's what Milan don't really have. But that's not to take away anything from Fiorentina, who I thought Amrabat had a great game, because a lot of people have been on his back a lot. Mandragora, just in general, Vincenzo Italiano is one of my favorite coaches in general. And I think that he's done such a terrific job. He just obviously, lost a lot. Lost Vlahovic, has managed to do a perfect job with Cabral. Perfect player, I think, when it comes to like a blue collar striker, right? Like somebody who really works hard for the team. And I love that, which is kind of what I want from Vlahovic. But you have a different answer.
No, it's not a different answer. I actually think I overlap a lot with what you're saying, Mina. I was thinking that there's a recurring problem with Milan, which is the left-hand side. You've got Theo Hernandez, who likes to bomb forward, and then you've either got Leao on the left-hand side with him, or this game it was Rebic playing in that left-hand side on the attack. And Rebic does not contribute nearly enough when he's on the pitch to the middle of the park, and Thiago doesn't do enough defending, and so you end up with Sandro Tonali having to slide out and fill some of that gap on the left-hand side. And then you end up stretched in midfield. And I think if you look at the contrast between two winning performances this weekend, Roma and Lazio both, and their compactness, I think what you'd see with Milan is a complete lack of compactness. You'd see forwards who are too high up the pitch, Teo who's stretching things out too much on the left-hand side, and then these gaps that Fiorentina were able to move into, especially on the right, down that side where it's Rebic and Teo. And I think that's the root of the problems. And I think it's something that Pioli has still not sussed out, even this new formation, is how do you compensate for having one side of the pitch that wants to be that attacking? And I think that's the core of it. Of course, better players always help, and losing Frank Kessié has been a damage to them. But I think what you're saying about Diaz and how he interprets the role differently is important, because if you're going to have some players who are a bit irresponsible like that when it comes to defending, then you need other players to work extra to cover it.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that's the big difference to me between again, Lazio is a great example, because Lazio was such a selfless team performance, and Milan lacked a little bit of that, and it showed.
Yeah, I do think on some occasions, actually, that I've just said that Pioli sort of not really they are a side that don't really they want to play their game, and they're not sometimes as pragmatic as it needs to be, on this occasion when you don't have players that like Rebic and Ketelare as your options, like I might have packed my midfield a little bit more and played a different game, just as it is, like you said, it is a lot of these guys that don't do enough or come back to the midfield or try to remain compact, then maybe change it to suit them. And because what this does is just leave the defense really vulnerable at that moment. Mm-hmm. Having said all of that, after everything that I've just said about all of this, there is something to be worried about with the Milan away from home. So here's the thing. I was like, for sure, when I was talking about the betting, is because for the Champions League as well, I thought Milan have this, because it's Antonio Conte, right? And Spurs have just been atrocious to watch. Yeah. So I'm like, I think Milan could do this. Like, why not, And won the first leg. And then I looked at their away form. 6 wins and 5 losses away from home. Now, let me tell you who they defeated. They defeated Monza when they were under Stroppa. Salernitana when, what happens. Dynamo Zagreb. Hellas Verona, who are at the bottom. Empoli, when they were really struggling at the start of the season under Zanetti, still under Zanetti. And Sampdoria, who have picked up 1 win in 2022 at the time, and it was to Cremonese. You look at that, and then you look at the losses away from home and, like your Inters and sort of big teams, and you wonder, is this a team that's capable away from home? Because it seems like a remarkably different performance from them when they're at home at San Siro, and a different performance away from home, because they only seem to be defending the teams that you expect them to defeat the teams you expect them to defeat. So now I'm super worried about the Champions League.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I've never been that confident in any of them except for Napoli, so we'll find out. I think both Milan and Inter performed well in the first legs, both of them. I think probably exceeded my expectations in the first legs, even though Inter was a slightly less convincing win than Milan's was. But I've not thought at all that either of them are safe. I think these are two very in the balance ties, and I'm excited to watch them though. I'm excited for having Italian teams in knockout rounds of Champions League and having ties that are in the balance. That in itself is, sorry to say, step forward from where Italy has been recently, or Serie A has been recently with its clubs in Europe.
Let's hope we get some decent performances and ones at least that might make us feel that Serie A is still on top of the world. Atalanta drew 0-0 against Udinese, and it's a little bit bizarre, sort of, well, for one, Udinese, how they started the season, this team that was like thrashing everyone and coming up with these brilliant performances, especially sort of, 75 minutes onwards, to being this team that just can't win a game at all. And Atalanta, who've gone from the side that I thought were like really going to push for a top 4 place. Everyone talking about Ademola Lookman, but especially Rasmus Højlund, that we've discussed at great length about his brilliance, to now being this team that have only 5 victories in their last 12 games, just not effective and, I don't know, very, very imprecise in their movements.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the wheels have come off a bit at Atalanta. It's as you said, 3 games in a row that aren't good results, and time is, well, we're not running out of time quite yet. There's still time that you could turn this around in Serie A, but trending in the wrong direction, certainly, and not an encouraging game against Udinese at all.
Actually, Udinese, in the last 17 games, they've won once. God knows what happened there. Especially weird when they didn't even have Pereira on this game. I would have thought a lot more from Atalanta. I don't know what's going on there, but I hope they can turn it around and still make it interesting. Other than that, any games that stuck out for you? Because they were all really boring 0-0s.
I think we've covered the interesting ones. It was not the most, well, it was a really entertaining week in Serie A because the big games were really entertaining. I would say outside of the big games, there was a few duds, weren't there? But that happens sometimes. Yeah.
Monza won 2-1. That was one game that had goals in it. But barring that, nothing else to really talk about. Let's do a few shout outs to some new Chronicles Tifosi. Let's start off with welcome to Christine Paulson. Welcome to Gordon Stephen. Hello to Pat Lawrence. And welcome to Nicholas Restrepo.
And welcome as well to Mohammed Yaqub, to the mysteriously named J-Dub. And then we've got welcome to Bill. My granddad was called Bill. It's not my granddad because he's not with us anymore, but Bill. And Jacob as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for supporting the channel and for helping us keep this podcast going and getting to chat about Serie A and enjoy it with you guys every week. As usual, you can find us on socials. We're on Twitter at Mina Rzouki and at Nicky Bandini. You can subscribe to Serie A Chronicles on YouTube for clips and shorts of the show. Do jump on there and hit subscribe on that YouTube channel if you're so inclined. It doesn't cost a thing and it does help the show. And you can, of course, sign up to our Patreon membership if you are one of the people who is listening to this episode for free, because I think this is a free episode, at serieachronicles.com. We will be back next week with another show, but of course we'll be back before then with some voice notes after the European games this week as well. So until then, see you next time.
Oh yeah, here it is. CNN. Italian Serie A strugglers Sampdoria received a sinister warning from an unknown source on Saturday when a severed pig's head was delivered to the club's headquarters.
Oh my God.
Police were called onto the scene. Sampdoria expressed profound outrage and indignation in the face of yet another serious act of intimidation because a blank bullet was delivered to Sampdoria's offices accompanied by threats against Ferrero and Eduardo Garrone, who's the previous owner. Like, what the hell? Yeah, so... I mean, it's like all falling apart. I feel really sorry for Stankovic, but if I was him, I would have never taken that job anyway. So, God, Sampdoria were a good team once upon a time. Imagine that.
Oh, they've been a great team at times.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
There's a little bit of magic in photographs. With the click of a button, we can capture a moment in time and keep it forever. At Rockbrook Camera, let their creative team help you transform these precious memories into unique holiday gifts to last a lifetime. Most people know Rockbrook Camera for their large selection of camera gear and expert photo advice, but they're also the area's best high-quality photo lab. Choose from a variety of gifts to personalize, such as their popular photo ornaments, high-quality canvas wraps, and photo mugs. With so many gift options ready to be personalized, it's easy to share a story, a moment, or a memory that's made to delight friends, family, or even yourself. Send joy through the mailbox with Rockbrook Camera's thoughtfully designed photo greeting cards, ready to pick up in 48 hours or less. Start creating today with help from Rockbrook Camera's friendly staff in-store or online in the convenience of your home. Visit Rockbrook Camera today, 1 block south of 168th and West Center in Omaha, 70th and Pioneers in Lincoln, or online at rockbrookcamera.com.